In the previous tutorial video, we developed two versions of the console applications, but now we're going to basically to really factor this middle part, stage number 2, for the logic into the corresponding utility methods we already emphasized last week. The reason we are doing this is we want to really put the logic into some method so that it can be reused for as many times as possible in the future. So this is really the good practice to have. And that's a pattern we're going to stick to throughout the semester. Let's see how we can do this. Remember, we got two versions of the we got two versions of the console apps, meaning that we're going to get two versions of the utility methods. We're going to make it clear. Alright, so now double click on this tab just to restore, and let me just close this just to avoid confusion. And also let me clear this console, right click and say clear. Right, we're now clean. What we're going to do is we're going to create under model, right? This is where we actually create a class that contains utility methods. So right click on the model package and say new, and then say class over here. And we're going to give a name. Why don't we just say sequence? Okay, just make it easier for you to type. You don't need to say arithmetic sequence. Just follow the spelling. Okay, just spell it correctly. Okay, sequence, and remember name should be capitalized. And now in this case, we are not in the console application anymore. So you should not click on the public static void name option here. You should not, negative. And say finish. Okay, so this is our sequence class, and then we're going to put in the utility method. We're going to put in two versions. So let me declare them first. Public, meaning that anybody from other packages can actually call this method. And then static, and as far as the course is concerned, all you need to know at this point is static simply means you can call the method without creating an object. You can simply use sequence dot method name. That's all you need to know. And we talk about return type, the output type. We actually need two methods over here. Let me just show you why. If you actually go to this part over here, you can see there are two outputs we need to create. One is the sequence, which is of type string. So that means we need to create a method that is going to return a string in order to be saved into, stored into SIG over here. And the second method we're going to need will be returning some integer, so that return value integer can be stored into this sum over here, right? So we need two methods. I'm just trying to explain to you how we decide the number of methods we need. Let's go back to sequence over here, and then the first one, let's say string, and then we say get sequence. So you since we are already moving on to week number 2, you should really try to see if you can define methods on your own. I'm still trying to spoon feed you to really see how we can declare methods, but that's something eventually soon you want to get used to how to do the method yourself, right? So that's the output type, and also it's going to be input type. And to really get a sequence, what do we need, right? So if you look at the calculation over here for sequence, we so here we got term 1, 2, 3, 4. But the way we calculate them is by using the first term and also the common difference over here. So we actually need both of them. All right. So let's go back here. We'll simply say integer ft. Okay, the first term. And then we're also going to say also integer common difference d, right? So here the variable names over here for parameter is completely up to you. So I'm just choosing something that's easier for you to follow through the logic. Okay, and then curly brackets over here, make sure they match over here. And typically, if you got any return type that's not void, meaning that you must return something for the method, you can see currently the body of the method is simply just empty, and now you can see it's complaining. If you move your mouse over, it's going to say this method must return a result of type string, but you haven't got anything yet. To really get rid of this compilation error, which is really important, error is unacceptable, right? To really get rid of it temporarily, you can simply say string. I can say result. So you can always use the name result, and the type of the result should simply just match whatever the return type is, right? And now just you can give any arbitrary value for string. Actually, it can just give an empty string, for example, just empty string. And then eventually you're going to return the result over here. And then in the middle, you're going to have as many lines as possible to really work out the logic, but we'll get there in a moment. Okay, that's method number 1. What about method number 2? So we're going to get public static, And now method number 2 is actually going to get the sum for the sequence over here. And to really get a sum of the sequence, we also need the first term and also the common difference to really calculate, right? Let's go back there. Integer, get the sum. Get sum, I think that'll be okay, right? Or you can say get sum of sequence, but just make it a little bit shorter for you. So we also need integer ft, first term, and also integer common difference, right? We also need these two. And similarly, so now we're going to declare result to be of the same type as the return type. Oops, sorry. So keep it here, and then we're going to say integer result, and now what can be the default value for numbers? Just put 0 over here, just for now. And then you're going to say return the result. In the middle, we're also going to somehow reassign the results so that it's going to eventually return the right value. Okay, so these are the two methods. Okay, so what should we do? Let's do one by one. For version number 1, we are simply just going to copy and paste the relevant code from application 1. Okay, let's see how we can do it. Okay, let me maximize it so now we can also see the full scale over here. Basically, for both methods, you will need to work out exactly what turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, turn 4, turn 5 are. Okay, so now let me first of all copy this block of code. Okay, you can just do Control C or Command C, or you can say simply copy over here, right? Let me go back to sequence over here. Okay, so to get the sequence over here, so now I'm just going to paste Control V or Command V, or you can simply right click and say paste. Okay, so now these are turn 1, turn 2, 3, 4, 5. So these are the local variables. They are local only to the get sequence method over here, right? Outside the scope of the get sequence, you cannot refer to turn 1, turn 2, turn 3. Okay. Similarly, we're also going to need these local variables. So let me also get them over here. So this will also come out. So now that's why I want to show you. The turn 1 over here is a different variable that's separate from turn 1 over here. They belong to a different scope. You can think about the turn 1 over here belong to only this particular method, right? Outside the scope of this method, the turn 1 over here simply doesn't make sense. It's just not visible, right? Similarly, the turn 1 over here is referring has the scope that's within this particular method only. Right? If outside the scope of this particular method, you simply just cannot use that variable. But so these two variables, they just happen to have the same name, but they are not the same variable. You want to think about, right? They are not the same. Right? Let's go back here. Let's see how we can calculate the string. Right? First of all, let's say the string over here. Let me just copy this one. I'm going to delete them in just a moment. I can Control C or Command C, copy it, and let's go back to this particular sequence over here. And then I can simply paste it over here. So now what I can do is I can simply so now it's up to you. You can declare just another sequence variable, and then over here you can simply reassign result to be the sequence. That's one way to do. Okay, or you can simply just replace. You can just simply say something like this. You can simply say result is simply assigned to this particular expression over here. You can do that as well, right? It's just kind of up to you. Okay, I'll leave this version over here. Okay, so what we're doing it here over here is this block of code pretty much does the same thing as we did in this part of the console application. So this part over here, we simply factor this block of code into that method there, so that later on, whenever we want to calculate the sequence string, we can always just call this method here by passing the two necessary input, and then we are done, right? You can call this as many times as you like to avoid duplicates. All right, that's number 1. What about number 2? It will be very similar. So now if you go back to number 2 over here, what I can do is I can do this, right? Integer sum, right? Copy this line, and then go back there, and then paste it over here, right? So now it's kind of up to you. You can do something similar. You can simply replace this by result, right? Or you can simply say the result is reassigned to sum. And notice that what's wrong. If you say sum is reassigned to result, it's going to be wrong. Why? Very briefly, that's something you should have known maybe from what you learned from the lecture. assignments operator here, the order, the sort, the target, and the source is really important. So here, in this correct version here, we are saying that we are trying to assign whatever that is stored in the sum into the result. The wrong version over here, we are storing whatever that is stored in the result. What is that? By default, it's simply 0. So we are storing 0 into the sum. In that case, we are not doing the right thing, right? Okay, just want to mention to you. All right, so now that one is also working. So now what we can do is we can simply go back, and then we're just going to simplify this console application. So now we're just going to say over here, we can delete this already. You can either delete it, or you can simply select the block and then Control or Command /. I can maybe leave it here just as a reminder notes. You just remember that's the trace of the refactoring. Let me leave it there. Okay. So now what about sequence over here? Well, to really calculate sequence, now we got everything we need. We can simply say sequence, the class name, and dot. So now we can choose the method we need. We can say get sequence, right? That's going to return a string. And what do we need? We need the first term, which is referring to this input over here. We also need a common difference, which is referring to the common difference over here, right? That's good, right? This line is fine. And what about the sum? And we're going to call also that method there. So we're going to say sequence.get sum over here. Similarly, you can see the ft is referring to the input from the user, and also d is referring to the store value from the user from the keyboard, right? That's also going to be fine. So this will be the improved version that we want for sequence app 1. Let's try that right away. Run it, and then 3 and 2. So we got exactly the same as before, right? You can try other input value just to make sure it's really working out correctly. So this is definitely the improved version. And then later on, I'm going to show you how to use debugger, which will be discussed in the next video. Okay. Let us now do very quickly. Before that, I want you to do some exercise on the paper for yourself, right? If you recall from last week, this is some diagram that we did together over here about in the console application. For example, in last week, we talked about when you call circle.getArea for radius 1, which might be some value. The second call, we try to say circle.getArea and then radius 2, which might be of some other value. And then the corresponding effects is when we call the same method twice, it's going to replace or substitute the parameter value over here by the different input value over here. And then it will be substituted accordingly in every occurrence of the input parameter, right? That's what we said last week. If you have doubts, please review that part of the video. So now, the little exercise I want you to do is, I want you to think about when we try to make this call to get sequence over here, and then how is the ft and also d replaced accordingly, right? The value, right? For example, if we enter 3 here and also 2 over here, right? How would that work similar to this particular pattern that we spoke about? So that'll be some very important exercise for you to do to strengthen your understanding. I'll leave that to you. If you got trouble working this out, please get in touch with me. All right. All right. So now, before I try to create a second one, you can see we got get sequence and also we got get sum. We want to create a second version of these so that the internal local variables, the number of them, will be minimized. So before I do that, let me just go to sequence over here. I want to show you, remember I showed you in the previous video how you can rename classes, but now we're going to show you how you can rename methods. It will be similar. Again, the no-no will be you don't really want to just say 1 over just say 1 over here manually. That's not a way to go. Okay. To rename it systematically, use your mouse to click on get sequence, the name of the method here. Right click and go to refactor and rename. And here you can see the text box over here. Just append 1 over here, version number 1. Enter. Accordingly, if you go back to app number 1, so now it has been changed to 1, right? Automatically. So that's why you really want to do renaming systematically using the refactoring tool in Eclipse. Go back there, and then we're going to move your mouse over here, right click, and go to refactor and say rename over here, and then we'll say get sum over here, and 1. All right. So that's the first version. And now we want to create the other 2 versions corresponding to sequence app 2. So what I would do is, let me close sequence app 1 to avoid confusion. Let me open sequence app 2. So this will be the part of the code we want to do over here, right? Before I do that, let me create the methods first, right? We'll do something very similar. You can type it together with me. Maximize it. So now we're gonna get second version. Let me just make some comments over here. Okay, we can say first version of method called by sequence app 1. All right, so and then we're gonna have the second version over here. Okay, let me make a little bit more space over here. We can delete the new lines later, but I just want to make it more centralized. Okay, you can say over here, second version of methods called by sequence app 2. All right. Okay, so now let's see how we can do it. Well, we're gonna say something similar. So let's just save some time. You can simply copy the so-called header of the method over here. Right click, copy, and then that, hit enter. So now make sure you got a matching curly brackets over here. And then similar as before, string result is empty string, return the result. And similarly for the second one, this one should be 2, of course. Let's now change the name right away, right? We haven't used it yet, so we don't need a refactoring tool. This is where we first define that method, so you can just give the right name. Let's now move on to copy the header of this particular method here. And then, so it should be get sum 2. And then enter, right? Make sure it's the matching curly brackets. So now we can say integer result is equal to 0 to begin with, and then return result. All right, let's see how we can program the middle. Okay, so now the middle, let's add a new line here. So let's do the first one. So now to really calculate the sequence, let's simply well, let's copy this line. That's all we need. Copy, okay, and then go back here, and then you can simply paste, right? That's the one. And you want to make sure if you simply leave the program like this, it's not correct because you're returning result, not the sequence, right? Of course, you can change the result to be sequence, but I'm just trying to show you the pattern over here. You can always get something over here, result and result as the first and last line, and then try to reassign. So here you can say result is reassigned to sequence over here. So what about for get sum 2 over here? Go back here, and then let's copy this line over here, copy it, and now we're gonna paste it over here. And now make sure the only thing you're gonna do is you're gonna say the result over here is gonna be reassigned to sum. Okay, that's basically what we're gonna do. Okay, which version you want to take is kind of up to you. I just want to give you examples so you can practice. Let's go back here. How do we call the methods? For version number 2, you can say for the sequence. So now delete the right hand side for the assignments. It's going to be sequence.get. So now we're gonna move your. You can use the arrow key to go down. So you want to choose get sequence 2, and then FT and D, right? So again, FT is referring to the FT over here, and the D is referring to the user input value D over here, right? Similarly, what about the sum? Sequence.get, and then you want to say sum version number 2, right? Okay, like that. Again, FT is referring to FT, and D is referring to D, right? Hopefully, so far you're still following the big picture, right? So I'm going maybe a little bit without too many pauses, but I think since you can always pause the video and really to get clear about what's going on over here. Very quick recap. For application number 1, we're calling version 1 of the 2 methods. Application 2, we're calling version 2 of the 2 methods over here, right? So now for app 2, we're just going to hit on console. Oh, let me just do this. Maximize it, and then rerun it. Okay, you can see over here. 3 and 2, right? So that's the correct result. So now we got the console applications properly improved by calling utility methods, the 2 versions. So far, hopefully you're okay. Let me do one final thing. Remember, we also talk about JUnit tests, right? So let me do that very quickly. just to show you. But typically, you will be given JUnit test to you. But I want to say, for every week when we are doing your lab tutorial, we can type together about some JUnit test. Okay, at least you know how to read them. That will be something you're expected to know. Okay, let's now right-click on JUnit tests over here. Okay, the package, new, and also JUnit test case over here, right? And then we're just going to type the name. Let's say test sequence. Always the first name will just be the test, just a common prefix, right? And then just gonna say finish. For the very first time, it's gonna add JUnits into your, oh, sorry, something I forgot. Say cancel over here, right? We want to choose JUnit 4, not the new JUnit Jupyter test. I forgot, right? Please make sure you always choose JUnit 4 over here, right? And then you're gonna say finish. And then, so now make sure it's gonna add JUnit 4 library to the build path and say okay. Okay, let's now write some JUnit tests together very quickly, right? We're gonna test version 1 and version 2 together. Let's just use this this particular sequence that we have been speaking about. This sequence over here, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11. Let's do that. Basically, we're just going to call the utility methods to make sure they're okay. We're just going to check their return value against the expected value, rather than simply printing to the console, right? Remember the separation of concern. So now we can say test. Always the test method should start with test, all lower cases. Let's say get sequence. So when you're typing, maybe Eclipse is showing you all the parentheses over here, but don't worry. Okay, get sequence 1. Okay, that'll be version number 1. So now how do we define this test? Okay, so what we can do is we can say string, declare some variable, and this return value sequence is from basically, you can think about what we're doing over here. If you go to sequence app 1, we'll simply do this one here over here, right? Let me just copy this line to show you more correspondingly how we are deriving the test. Copy this line over here and go back to test sequence over here. Copy this line, paste this line. So now we just need to supply some specific values for the test cases. Remember this, in console application, you're reading the inputs manually from the user keyboard. But in JUnit test, you fix the input values for each test. That's a fundamental difference. So now ft first term will be 2, 3, and also this will be 2, right? So that's a return sequence, is a string value over here. But now we want to make sure this actual value matches the expected value. So we can say assert equals over here. Okay. So now remember, the first one is going to be the expected, right? This will be expected, and this will be the actual, right? Remember the sequence over here. So now what about expected? Expected would be, it's going to be a string over here, opening, closing angle brackets, and then it's going to be 3, comma, space, 5, comma, space, 7, comma, space, 9, comma, space, 11. That's it, right? You got to be very careful when you type it. And then we're going to say sequence over here dot the first version. All right, choose the first version and 3, and then actually, sorry, this is already there. Beg your pardon. So you can just put sequence over here. Of course, what you could have done is you simply don't have this local variable over here. You simply copy and paste this expression over here, put it here. For example, you can, let me show it to you. Alternatively, you can copy this expression and paste it here and then put it like that. That'll be one way to go. It's kind of up to you. But for me, I just want to show you another way to write it. This might be a little bit more informative to you. So first get the return value from this method call that you want to test into seq over here. And then the seq is going to be compared against the expected value over here. That's exactly what's happening here. All right, let's do another test. Every time, let me maximize it over here. So every time when you want to do test, you'll say at and then capital test, right? And then we're just going to say public void, doesn't return anything, test get sum, right? That's the second method, version 1. All right, we're going to say integer, the sum will be equal to each sequence dot get sum. over here, right? Choose the first version, 3 and 2, the same sequence we are testing. And then we're going to say assert equals. Remember last week when we talked about asserting the equality between double numbers, you have to specify tolerance because of the floating point. But now for integers, we don't have to, right? What's the expected value? I remember it. It should be 35, right? You can check it in the previous part, in the tutorial. And then it should be simply the sum over here. So that's, again, the expected sum. That's the actual sum that's returned by version 1 of the method, right? So now we're going to test for version 2 as well. So I'm going to be a bit lazy. Can you simply just copy this part over here, Control C, and then Control V. But of course, initially it's going to complain. So we're going to change this to be 2. Sorry, let me do it again. 2 over here. And then change this to be 2 as well, right? But now you're going to make sure you also change this call to be 2 and also change this to be 2 as well, right? It's really important. So, okay, good. So now we got 4 tests over here. 1, 2, 3, 4. You can now see that this one here is testing for version number 1. And this test over here is testing for version number 2. And for the sum method, this one here, this test is testing for version number 1. And this test over here is testing for version number 2. Okay, hopefully it's clear to you. All right, let's now run the test. Hopefully we'll get a green bar. And now if you simply right click on under JUnit Tests over here, right click on test sequence.java. Run as JUnit test. All right, we got a green bar. All right. So now you can think about, so far it's more like just doing another complete example together with you that's more complicated than the circle example from last week. So now it will just review all the basics that we talk about to reinforce. All right. And starting from the next video, we'll show to you a very important course learning outcome about debugger.